Every major conflict in American history has a moment where everything begins to go wrong. For the Toledo War, that moment wasn't a battle, a gunshot, or a speech. It was a simple stroke of ink on an old, unreliable map from 1787. A mapmaker placed the southern tip of Lake Michigan several miles farther south than it truly was, and from that single error came decades of territorial confusion, political tension, and a near war between Ohio and the Michigan Territory. The Northwest Ordinance stated that Michigan's southern border should extend directly through the southerly bend of Lake Michigan. Congress accepted that rule without checking the accuracy of the map they were using. There were no satellites, no aerial surveys, just rough estimations. The border they created was based on a mistake nobody bothered to correct. For decades, the error slept quietly, unnoticed by settlers or politicians. The Toledo Strip, 468 square miles of swampy, underdeveloped land, had no real value. Nobody fought over it. Nobody cared about it. It was simply a forgotten stretch of wilderness drawn incorrectly on a map. Everything changed when the canal boom began sweeping through the Midwest in the early 1800s. When engineers and politicians realized that the Ohio and Erie Canal would connect the Ohio River to Lake Erie, suddenly, the end point of that canal became the gold mine of future trade. And the end point, according to economic visionaries and surveyors, would be Toledo. In a matter of years, the Toledo Strip went from worthless marshland to an essential gateway for shipping, commerce, and strategic control. Ohio's politicians quickly understood what was at stake. A thriving Toledo meant more power, more money, and more influence in national politics. Michigan's leaders understood the same thing. Without Toledo, their long-held ambitions for statehood would weaken. Their population numbers, their economic future, even their political identity hinged on controlling that port. Ohio believed the southeast tilting Harris Line survey placed Toledo squarely inside their state. Michigan believed the original Northwest Ordinance and the straight Fulton Line, drawn according to it, proved Toledo was theirs. Both sides claimed legal justification. Both sides claimed historical legitimacy. And both sides believed the other was attempting to steal land that did not belong to them. The political landscape grew tense. In Washington, conversations began circulating in congressional hallways. Many members of Congress wanted Michigan to wait for statehood. Ohio, on the other hand, was an established political force with a large voting population. President Andrew Jackson was preparing for re-election battles and legislative negotiations. Ohio's support mattered. Michigan's did not. Quietly, almost imperceptibly, support began shifting toward Ohio. No law declared this shift. No public statement was issued. But political pressure has a way of making itself felt without being spoken aloud. Michigan's acting governor, Stevens T. Mason, stepped into the center of this storm. Only 24 years old, ambitious, confident, and fiercely protective of Michigan's territorial rights, Mason became the symbol of resistance. He studied the historical documents, reviewed maps, and publicly declared Michigan's claim to the Toledo Strip non-negotiable. In one of his letters, he wrote, "We cannot surrender even 1 foot of Michigan soil without surrendering everything." Ohio's newspapers mocked him, calling him the boy governor. Washington insiders dismissed him as inexperienced. But Michigan's settlers respected him. They saw a leader who refused to be intimidated by a larger, more influential neighbor. Tensions escalated when Ohio hired surveyor William Harris to mark the Harris Line on the ground. The survey team believed they were doing routine work, but when they crossed into what Michigan considered its territory, the situation turned volatile. Michigan militia confronted the surveyors, forced them to retreat, and confiscated some of their tools. In later accounts, Michigan residents described the Ohio surveyors as trespassers sent to provoke a reaction. Whether or not that was the intention, the effect was the same. The confrontation gave Ohio grounds to portray Michigan as the aggressor. At this point, both states began preparing for potential violence. Militias drilled near the border. Local newspapers printed stories about armed men, whispered threats, and the possibility of bloodshed. The Toledo Strip, once quiet and forgotten, became the center of the most heated dispute in the region. Michigan believed it had the law on its side. Ohio believed it had political support in Washington. Neither side wanted to be seen as weak. Neither side wanted to back down. And, as with many conflicts, pride began to overshadow reason. Behind closed doors, conversations continued in Washington. Ohio's congressional delegation applied pressure, reminding federal leaders of the votes and influence Ohio brought to national politics. Michigan had no delegation at all. As a territory, it had no senators, no representatives, and no political leverage. Stevens T. Mason's growing popularity among Michigan residents began worrying federal officials. His determination, once admirable, now appeared to them as stubbornness. His refusal to compromise made the conflict harder to manage. And, in a government as political as Jackson's, the easiest solution was often the one that removed obstacles rather than accommodated them. In August 1835, Michigan prepared to enforce the Pains and Penalties Act, a territorial law that criminalized any Ohio officials entering the Toledo Strip. Ohio responded by authorizing local elections in the disputed area, asserting its own governing authority. Both sides believed they were right. Both sides believed they were cornered. Something had to give. And then it did. Without public announcement or dramatic ceremony, President Andrew Jackson made a single administrative decision that changed the entire balance of power. He signed an order removing Stevens T. Mason from his position as acting governor of Michigan. The federal government justified the removal by saying Mason was escalating tensions and refusing compromise. The truth was simpler and far more political. Eliminating Mason made the situation easier for Washington to control, and it took pressure off Ohio. Michigan had lost its most determined defender, but the people of Michigan did not know this yet. As this chapter closes, the conflict has not yet erupted into violence. No shots have been fired, no blood has been spilled. But the first strike has already occurred, not on a battlefield, but in a political office in Washington. Michigan's strongest voice has been silenced. Ohio's position has been strengthened. And the Toledo Strip is now more contested than ever. The war is only beginning. It began with a whisper in the dark, a rumor spreading across small taverns, muddy roads, and log cabin settlements along the state line. Ohio men are crossing the border tonight. Some treated it as gossip, others as a warning, but everyone understood what it meant. The Toledo Strip was no longer a disputed piece of land. It was becoming a battlefield, waiting for a spark. If you are enjoying this video so far, here is gently reminder to subscribe, like, comment, and share if you want more gripping stories like this. Ohio had lost patience with Michigan's resistance. Their leaders were tired of legal arguments, tired of territorial threats, tired of a 24-year-old governor standing in their way. So they made a decision. If Michigan wouldn't stand down willingly, Ohio would take control of the border by force, quietly, strategically, and under the cover of night. To the north, in Michigan settlements, the mood was equally tense. Many settlers feared Ohio's growing confidence, and the removal of Governor Stevens T. Mason sent shockwaves through the territory. They wondered whether Washington had chosen sides. They wondered whether the law still protected them. They wondered if the border they had defended all their lives was slipping away. Michigan's militia captains knew trouble was coming. For months, they had watched Ohio surveyors and officials make increasingly bold moves toward Toledo. They had seen the Harris Line carved into the ground like a signature claiming the land. They had read Ohio's new legislation, asserting political control over villages Michigan considered its own. And now, with Mason gone, they feared Ohio believed the battlefield was empty. They were wrong. Michigan wasn't leaderless. If anything, Mason's removal only strengthened the resolve of the territory's settlers. The people viewed him as a symbol of defiance. And even though Washington declared he was no longer governor, Michigan residents refused to let him go. They still answered to him. They still trusted him. They still believed he was the only leader who would protect their rights. Word soon reached Mason that Ohio forces were planning to conduct government business inside the Toledo Strip, including holding official elections under Ohio law. To Michigan, allowing such elections meant surrendering the land without a fight. Mason understood what this meant. In a letter written around this time, he warned, "Should we yield this point, the surrender of all that is important to us will follow." Michigan could not allow Ohio to establish authority in the Strip, even if the federal government seemed inclined to favor Ohio's position. Territorial pride was at stake, local security was at stake, and most importantly, Michigan's future as a state was at stake. Mason called on Michigan militia leaders again, instructing them to prevent any Ohio incursion into Toledo. The plan was simple. Ohio officials were not to be harmed, but they were not to be allowed entry. Michigan men were to patrol the border roads, monitor the villages, and keep watch for any suspicious movements. It wasn't war, not yet, but it wasn't peace either. The tension escalated when a group of Ohio surveyors attempted to resume their work under armed escort. Michigan considered this a violation of the Pains and Penalties Act and sent militia units to intercept them. What followed became one of the first confrontations that nearly turned deadly. The Michigan militia surrounded the Ohio group at a site known as Phillips Corners. Several warning shots were fired into the air, causing panic among the surveyors. They fled in chaos, leaving behind tools and supplies that Michigan seized. The incident quickly spread across newspapers in both territories. Ohio called Michigan's actions an act of aggression. Michigan insisted it was a lawful enforcement of territorial authority. Washington said little, but listened carefully. The border tensions were now undeniable. To Ohio, Michigan's response at Phillips Corners proved they were reckless and hostile. Ohio politicians began pressuring Governor Robert Lucas to take stronger action. Lucas was not a man easily intimidated. If Michigan wanted a fight, he was prepared to give them one. To Michigan, the incident was a warning that Ohio intended to force its way into Toledo, and they were determined to resist. Settlers across the borderlands began preparing for the worst. Blacksmiths hammered out new bayonets. Farmers kept muskets by their doors. Young men drilled in makeshift formations. Even families who had no stake in the conflict were drawn into the atmosphere of fear and uncertainty. In the midst of this rising tension, Ohio made a bold move. They scheduled elections for positions in the newly created Lucas County, a county that encompassed much of the disputed Toledo Strip. This act was not just symbolic. It was a direct challenge to Michigan's claim. If Ohio could successfully conduct elections there, they would have concrete evidence that the region accepted Ohio governance. Michigan viewed this as an invasion disguised as politics. Stevens T. Mason, despite being officially removed, still commanded Michigan's loyalty. He ordered the militia to prevent Ohio polls from operating. He authorized arrests of any Ohio officials attempting to conduct governmental business in the Strip, and he mobilized local sheriffs to enforce Michigan law. This set the stage for one of the most dramatic confrontations of the entire Toledo War. As Ohio officials attempted to enter Toledo to hold their county elections, they were met by Michigan Sheriff Joseph Wood, backed by a detachment of armed militia. Wood announced that Ohio's authority had no legal standing in the territory and that the election would not be permitted. The Ohio group refused to leave. They stood their ground, citing Ohio state law. Michigan's militia refused to back down, citing the Northwest Ordinance and territorial law. For several tense minutes, both sides stared at each other, hands on weapons, waiting for the slightest mistake to turn the standoff violent. A single spark would have been enough. But instead, the Ohio officials slowly retreated. The election would not take place that day. The retreat, however, did not solve the conflict. It made it worse. Ohio newspapers accused Michigan of tyranny. Michigan newspapers accused Ohio of attempted annexation. And Washington was flooded with conflicting reports, each claiming the other side was escalating tensions. President Jackson's frustration grew. He did not want a border war within the United States, but he also did not want to alienate Ohio's political support. Removing Mason had been his first attempt to control the situation, but Michigan's refusal to accept the decision made things more complicated. Mason, though officially dismissed, remained a powerful presence. He continued to act as Michigan's leader, issuing directives, commanding militia cooperation, and refusing to bow to Ohio pressure. Michigan residents supported him almost unanimously. In their eyes, Washington's removal order was irrelevant. Their loyalty was to the man who defended their home, not to the distant politicians who had never set foot in the Toledo swamps. Meanwhile, Governor Lucas of Ohio grew increasingly determined. Michigan's defiance only strengthened his resolve to enforce Ohio's claim. He ordered additional militia to be mobilized, funded new operations in Toledo, and urged President Jackson to intervene more aggressively. Then came a document that changed the tone of the entire conflict. It was a communication from the U.S. Attorney General Benjamin Butler, delivered to both Michigan and Ohio. Butler reviewed the historical evidence and concluded privately that Michigan's claim to the Toledo Strip was actually stronger under the Northwest Ordinance. According to his analysis, the straight east-west line described in the law clearly placed the Strip inside Michigan territory. This legal opinion, if made public, could shift national perception entirely. But it wasn't made public. It was quietly buried. Jackson had no intention of allowing a legal technicality to jeopardize Ohio's support. Michigan never knew the federal government secretly agreed with them. They continued fighting under the assumption that Washington was steadfastly supporting Ohio. Ohio, unaware of Butler's private conclusion, continued to act as though they possessed the superior legal claim. The truth was locked away in Washington's drawers, sealed under political necessity. This revelation never reached the border settlers. They armed themselves, patrolled roads, and lived through nights filled with rumors of militia movements. And then, one morning, Michigan's militia leader received startling intelligence. Ohio's forces were planning something bold, and they were planning it soon. Michigan believed the next move would be peaceful pressure, political maneuvering, or another attempt at an election. They were wrong. Ohio was preparing to send militia units directly into the Strip to protect their officials and assert their authority, an operation that could turn confrontation into open conflict. Michigan's commanders were caught off guard. And in the next chapter, what they discovered would push the Toledo War into its most dangerous phase yet. It began with a piece of intelligence that seemed impossible. A Michigan scout riding the muddy roads near the disputed border overheard a conversation between Ohio militiamen camped under cover of darkness. They were speaking quietly, trying to keep their plans concealed. But one sentence drifted clearly through the still night air. They strike tomorrow before sunrise. The scout could scarcely believe what he'd heard. Ohio wasn't just sending officials or surveyors this time. They were sending armed men, not to defend themselves, not to escort a team, but to carry out a coordinated operation inside territory Michigan believed it owned. The message spread quickly across the Michigan border settlements. Men were awakened from their sleep. Horses were saddled in minutes. Lanterns flickered in barns and kitchens as families prepared for what might be their first real battle. No one knew how many Ohio men were coming or what their exact mission was, but everyone understood something had shifted. This was no longer a political argument. This was a calculated move. Michigan militia leaders rushed to headquarters. Their faces were drawn, their voices sharp. Many wondered whether Ohio intended to seize key buildings, detain Michigan officials, or occupy the roads leading into Toledo. Every possibility carried the risk of bloodshed. Stevens T. Mason was informed immediately. Despite Washington's attempt to strip him of power, Mason remained Michigan's unchallenged leader in the hearts of its people. And now, he faced a crisis he could not avoid. Mason studied the reports and issued a single order. Michigan militia would mobilize before dawn and intercept any Ohio forces crossing into disputed territory. There was no room for hesitation. In his mind, failing to respond meant surrendering the Strip entirely. By the time the first faint light touched the horizon, Michigan militia were already positioned along strategic points on the roads leading to Toledo. Some hid behind tree lines. Others stood openly, muskets slung across their shoulders. The tension was thick enough to feel in the air. But as the hours passed, nothing happened. No Ohio militia appeared, no wagons, no officials, nothing. For a moment, Michigan wondered if the intelligence had been wrong, if the late-night whispers had been misheard. But then a fresh report came in. Ohio men were moving, but not along the main road. They had chosen a different route entirely. They had cut through the woods, crossed private farms, and snuck past Michigan's expected checkpoints. Ohio hadn't canceled their operation. They had outmaneuvered Michigan. Word spread quickly among Michigan officers, followed by a wave of frustration. They had been preparing for a confrontation at the main road, while Ohio advanced quietly along an unguarded path. It was a maneuver that made one thing clear. This was not a symbolic show of force. It was a deliberate attempt to catch Michigan unprepared. Michigan regrouped immediately. Militia units dismounted, sprinted through the woods, and cut across fields in hopes of intercepting Ohio. Some took shortcuts through marshes, sinking into mud nearly to their knees, but they pushed forward anyway. For them, it wasn't just land at stake. It was pride. Meanwhile, Ohio's objective became clearer. Governor Lucas had authorized the establishment of official judicial proceedings inside the Toledo Strip. If Ohio could hold a session of the Lucas County Court within the disputed land, they would gain powerful evidence that the region recognized Ohio authority. It was a legal strategy disguised as a military operation. If they succeeded, the dispute might be settled in Ohio's favor without a single shot. Michigan couldn't allow that. As Ohio officials arrived at a small structure near Toledo, intending to conduct official business, they found themselves surrounded by Michigan militia. The standoff was immediate. Michigan demanded they leave. Ohio insisted they were within their rights. Both sides argued with unwavering confidence, and both sides carried loaded weapons. For several minutes, it seemed the entire conflict would explode right there. But then, something unexpected happened. The Ohio officials quietly slipped away. They had anticipated the confrontation. They had planned for it. And they had prepared a new strategy long before Michigan arrived. Instead of holding court at the public location Michigan expected, Ohio's judicial officers moved deeper into Toledo under cover of confusion. They found a small tavern outside Michigan's watch, and inside that humble wooden building, without ceremony or witnesses, they opened the first session of the Lucas County Court. It lasted less than an hour. No crowds, no resistance, no drama. Yet it changed everything. Ohio had just created written proof. They now had a legal record stating that government business had been conducted in the Toledo Strip under Ohio jurisdiction. In political terms, this was a stunning move. Michigan did not know it yet. But the victory Ohio sought had already been signed, sealed, and taken back across the border. When Michigan militia learned what Ohio had done, the anger in their ranks grew fierce. They had been tricked twice. First, by Ohio's midnight movement, then by the decoy courthouse meeting. Michigan needed a response, something that reminded Ohio the Strip was not theirs to manipulate. The response came faster than anyone expected. Shortly after Ohio's secret judicial session, Michigan officials discovered several Ohio sympathizers within Toledo who had aided the operation. Michigan considered this a violation of the Pains and Penalties Act and issued immediate arrest warrants. One of those named was an Ohio judge who had helped coordinate the day's events. Michigan law enforcement rode out to capture him. They found him at dawn, asleep in a Toledo tavern. When he resisted arrest, a brief struggle ensued and the judge received a minor cut across the hand. It was a small injury, barely more than a scratch, but Ohio newspapers later reported it as a violent assault. The rumor spread. A Michigan officer stabbed an Ohio judge. Ohio civilians were outraged. Michigan settlers claimed it was exaggerated. Washington heard conflicting stories and wasn't sure who to believe. This single injury, small as it was, became the most publicized moment of the entire Toledo War so far. It escalated tension dramatically, and it strengthened Ohio's position, giving them a powerful narrative to present to Congress. Michigan wasn't finished responding. The next morning, Michigan militia seized control of several roads leading into Toledo, blocking Ohio officials from returning. They set up guard posts, interrogated travelers, and monitored every wagon entering the area. Michigan insisted the actions were defensive measures allowed under territorial law. Ohio called them an occupation. At this point, the conflict could have spiraled into open violence. Both sides believed they were acting legally. Both believed the other was provoking them. And both believed the federal government's involvement would determine the final outcome. President Jackson, still hoping to avoid a national crisis, considered sending federal troops to restore order. His advisors warned him that such an action could prompt a rebellion in Michigan, where loyalty to Mason remained strong. Then, just as Michigan's confidence seemed to stabilize, the next twist arrived. A confidential message reached Detroit from Washington, this time not from the president, but from allies inside Congress. It stated that if Michigan continued to escalate the conflict, Congress would consider blocking Michigan's path to statehood indefinitely, not delaying it, not adjusting the terms, eliminating it entirely. This revelation struck Michigan leaders harder than any confrontation on the border. All their hopes, economic, political, and social, depended on becoming a state. If Congress shut the door, Michigan would remain a territory indefinitely, with no national representation and no political power. The warning was clear. Michigan could keep fighting, or Michigan could lose everything. The news spread quietly among Michigan officials, never announced publicly. Only a handful of leaders knew how delicate the situation had become. But even as they processed the danger, another twist emerged from the opposite direction. Ohio intercepted one of Michigan's internal communications, details of militia movements and Michigan's next planned operation in Toledo. How Ohio obtained it was unclear. Some claimed a Michigan courier lost the document. Others whispered about spies. Whatever the method, the effect was the same. Ohio gained access to Michigan's plans. They knew when Michigan would move next. They knew where Michigan intended to strike, and they knew how to counter it. The stage was now set for the most consequential confrontation of the entire war. Michigan believed they were preparing the perfect response. Ohio already knew every step of it. And as both sides readied their men, another player, one neither side expected, was preparing to enter the conflict. Federal officials were on the move, and they weren't coming to negotiate. The first sign of trouble was the dust. A thin plume rising on the western horizon, barely visible at first, but enough to send a chill through the Michigan militia camp stationed near the Maumee River. Dust meant riders. Riders meant news. And during the Toledo War, news almost always meant something had gone wrong. But these riders were different. They carried no state flags. They wore no militia colors. They traveled fast, with the urgency of men carrying orders they didn't want intercepted. When they arrived, their message was simple. A federal envoy is coming. Prepare to receive him. Michigan officers exchanged uneasy glances. Washington had remained distant throughout the conflict, issuing only cryptic warnings and political gestures. An envoy arriving at the border meant something had shifted. Either the federal government was ready to intervene, or they were ready to take sides more openly. Neither possibility brought comfort. Within hours, the envoy arrived. Richard Rush, a respected statesman and former Treasury Secretary. Calm, composed, and known for his ability to diffuse political crises, Rush was the type of man Washington sent when things were about to break. But no one understood why he came alone, and no one understood why he refused an escort. His first act was to request a private audience with Michigan officers. The meeting took place inside an abandoned farmhouse near the border. The windows were boarded. The air was stale. It was exactly the type of place a secret negotiation would happen. Rush wasted no time. He explained that the conflict had grown concerning in the eyes of the president. But he did not state which side Washington believed was at fault. He did not mention Mason. He did not mention Ohio. Instead, he spoke of national unity, the importance of avoiding bloodshed, and the need to reach a temporary settlement. Michigan officers listened politely, but with skepticism. They knew what temporary settlement meant. It was federal language for, "Stop fighting now. We'll deal with your rights later, maybe." Michigan's militia commander, General Joseph Brown, pressed Rush for clarity. Does Washington intend to enforce the Harris Line? Rush hesitated. Washington intends to enforce peace. That was not an answer, and everyone in the room knew it. The conversation continued for nearly an hour. Rush urged Michigan to withdraw militia from key positions, including several roads leading into Toledo. He assured them that doing so would not weaken their legal claim. But he offered nothing in writing. No guarantees, no commitments. Michigan officers refused. Without warning, Rush changed his approach. He revealed that President Jackson had received intelligence suggesting Michigan's next military move would escalate the conflict beyond control. He implied that continued militia actions could provoke a federal response. Then he delivered the message that changed the mood instantly. If Michigan continues down this path, Rush said, the president may be forced to suspend all consideration of Michigan's admission into the Union. The officers fell silent. The threat was not new, but this time it came directly from Jackson's personal envoy, and it was clear the president was running out of patience. Michigan was cornered. But Rush wasn't finished. He leaned forward, lowered his voice, and added one more line. There are those in Washington who believe Ohio's claim is more politically stable. It was a polite way of saying, Ohio has more influence. Michigan has more to lose. For the first time, Michigan officers realized the truth they had been ignoring. Washington wasn't here to mediate. Washington was here to control the outcome. And then came the twist. A second federal rider arrived, hours ahead of schedule. carrying a sealed letter addressed directly to Rush. The envoy broke the seal and read it silently. His expression changed. The officers noticed. Something was wrong. Rush folded the letter, stood up, and announced abruptly, "I must depart at once." He left without explanation, without warning, and without delivering the assurances Michigan desperately needed. His departure was so sudden, some officers believed he had received orders that contradicted everything he had just said. Within minutes, Rush was back on his horse. His men followed. They rode south toward Ohio. Michigan officers realized they had misjudged the situation. Washington wasn't trying to ease tensions. Washington was coordinating with Ohio. The meeting had never been about compromise. It had been a tactic to buy Ohio more time to prepare its next move, time to execute its strategies, time to strengthen its claim before Michigan acted again. By nightfall, Michigan knew they had been misled, but they didn't know how deeply. The next morning, more alarming intelligence arrived. Ohio was mobilizing larger militia forces than previously reported. These units were better supplied, better organized, and moving through the region in formations too deliberate to be routine drills. Ohio was preparing for something major. Michigan militiamen debated whether the new buildup was intended to defend Toledo or to take complete control of the surrounding region. Some believed Ohio was preparing to occupy the entire strip. Others feared they were planning arrests or even retaliation for the incident involving the wounded judge. Stevens T. Mason received these reports while traveling through the southern settlements. His face remained calm, but the men around him sensed his frustration. Everything Michigan had done to defend its land seemed to be slipping away, not because of Ohio's strength, but because of Washington's shifting loyalties. Mason met with his closest advisors that evening. The meeting lasted hours. Many urged caution. Others argued for a bold strike to remind Ohio the strip was not theirs to take. But before any decision could be made, scouts arrived with shocking news. Ohio had already entered Toledo, not openly, not with a show of force, but quietly, using small groups disguised as civilians. They walked through the town, spoke to residents, and met with known Ohio sympathizers. They carried legal documents, not weapons. Their mission was clear: establish civil control before Michigan could respond. For Michigan, this was a nightmare scenario. If Ohio could prove the residents of Toledo recognized Ohio authority, Congress might favor their claim. Michigan's militia efforts, legal arguments, and political appeals would mean nothing. Mason made a decision. It was the most controversial order of the entire conflict. Michigan militia were instructed to detain any Ohio officials found conducting government business in the Strip, even if they were unarmed. The next day, Michigan patrols intercepted a group of Ohio men near a bridge outside Toledo. They claimed to be merchants, but Michigan recognized one of them, a known Ohio election judge. He tried to escape. He was caught, and in the struggle, his coat tore open, revealing ballots and official documents from Ohio's government. The arrest caused chaos. Ohio newspapers accused Michigan of kidnapping. Michigan residents called it lawful enforcement. Washington called it deeply concerning. Mason, however, considered it a victory, not because of the arrest itself, but because of what the captured documents revealed. Ohio hadn't planned to conduct a single election or court session. They had planned dozens. across multiple villages simultaneously. Ohio intended to overwhelm Michigan with a flood of legal claims before the territory could respond. This was not a border dispute. It was a coordinated takeover, and Michigan now had the evidence. But as Mason prepared to present the documents to sympathetic congressional allies, a new message arrived from Detroit, one that stopped him cold. The message stated that several Michigan militia units had gone missing, not defeated, not intercepted, simply gone. Their officers were unreachable. Their camps were empty. Their weapons were left behind. No one knew where they were. Michigan suspected desertion. Ohio suspected something else. Washington suspected nothing at all. But the truth, when it was uncovered, would become the most startling twist of the Toledo War so far. Before the chapter ends, a reminder for viewers following this unfolding historical investigation. If you're enjoying this deep dive into hidden American history, don't forget to subscribe to StorySphere. Share this episode, like the video, and turn on notifications. More shocking chapters are coming next. Chapter 4 ends with Michigan facing its greatest mystery yet. Entire militia units vanished. No gunfire, no tracks, no bodies, just gone. And the explanation would change the entire direction of the war. It began like a ghost story. The Michigan commanders sent out riders to find the missing militia units, men who had been stationed near the border just days before. But when the scouts returned, their reports were all the same. The camps were empty. The fires were cold. The weapons were left in neat rows untouched. And there were no footprints leading away from the site. Not north, not south, not anywhere. It was as if 50 armed men had simply vanished into the trees. Michigan militia officers gathered around the abandoned campsite in silence. Even the horses seemed unsettled, stamping nervously, ears twitching at the slightest sound. No one could explain what they were seeing. No signs of battle, no struggle, no blood, no broken gear, nothing stolen. A disappearance without evidence is more frightening than an attack with casualties. An attack has logic. A disappearance suggests something worse. An unknown force moving the pieces. Michigan sent out a second search, then a third. Every road and trail between Monroe, Adrian, and Toledo was combed. They found nothing. Some believed the men deserted. Others whispered they had been ambushed. But there were no tracks, no gunshots reported, no weapons missing. Nothing fit. And then, just when Michigan feared the worst, a single rider appeared from the south, exhausted, mud-covered, and barely conscious. He was one of the missing men. The commanders rushed him into a tent, gave him water, and demanded answers. The soldier's voice shook as he recounted what had happened. According to him, the unit had been surrounded at night by a group of riders claiming to be federal peacekeepers sent by Washington to enforce neutrality in the disputed territory. The riders ordered the Michigan militia to disarm and follow them. Michigan officers refused. They demanded proof. But the riders dismissed their objections and presented documents stamped with the insignia of a federal office. The soldier admitted, "We didn't want a firefight with the United States government." So the unit complied, reluctantly, and was escorted south under the cover of darkness. But here was the twist. The riders were not federal troops. They were Ohio militia disguised under federal authority. The missing Michigan men had been abducted, peacefully but deliberately, and held for 2 days before being released one by one to avoid suspicion. The soldiers' testimony hit Michigan leadership like a hammer. Ohio had crossed a line far more provocative than a border. They had impersonated federal authority. If true, this was more than a violation of territorial rights. It was a political crime with national consequences. Before we continue, if you're engrossed in this unfolding drama and want to support historical storytelling like this, make sure you subscribe to Story Sphere, like the video, share it, and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. Now, back to the investigation. Michigan immediately sent word to Governor Mason. He wasted no time summoning a council in Detroit. There, he read the soldiers' testimony aloud. The room fell silent. Everyone knew the implications. Ohio didn't just want Toledo, they wanted control of the entire narrative, and they were willing to use deception, impersonation, and illegal detentions to get it done. Mason pounded his fist on the table. If they are claiming federal authority, then they are creating an authority not granted to them. But Michigan's problem was bigger than Ohio's boldness. They were losing the political battle in Washington. Michigan's aggressive patrolling, the arrests of Ohio officials, and the escalating confrontations played right into Ohio's portrayal of Michigan as reckless and violent. Washington was watching, and with each incident, Ohio gained more sympathy. Meanwhile, Governor Lucas of Ohio received reports of the operation's success. His strategy was working. Michigan was reacting emotionally, while Ohio advanced legally. With every document they filed, every court session they held, every road they quietly controlled, Ohio strengthened its claim to Toledo. Lucas's counsel praised the operation, calling it a peacekeeping maneuver. But some officials worried about the long-term consequences. Impersonating federal authority was dangerous. If exposed, it could provoke a backlash even Ohio couldn't control. Yet Lucas remained confident. He believed Washington would never punish Ohio, a key swing state, and that Michigan, still only a territory, could be pressured into surrender. But Lucas underestimated the one factor he couldn't predict: the people of Michigan. The disappearance of the militia units ignited a fire across the territory. Settlers in Ann Arbor, Monroe, and Detroit protested in the streets. Newspapers printed headlines accusing Ohio of kidnapping. Public meetings demanded retaliation. Michigan's pride had been struck at its core. One article declared, "Ohio may take our land, but they will not take our honor." That line spread quickly, becoming a rallying cry across the territory. Mason, seeing the anger rising, realized he needed to direct it carefully. One wrong move could give Ohio the excuse they wanted to escalate the conflict. But one weak move could cost Michigan the loyalty of its people and its chance at statehood. The next morning, Mason summoned his militia commanders. He issued a new directive. Michigan would begin a series of coordinated patrols along every major road entering the Toledo Strip, not just to monitor Ohio activity, but to assert Michigan law wherever it could be enforced. At the same time, he authorized the arrest of any group impersonating federal authority, including Ohio militia. Tension skyrocketed instantly. Ohio responded by sending additional forces into the disputed territory. These men stayed inside buildings, barns, and private homes, trying to avoid open confrontation. They were preparing for something bigger, but Michigan couldn't yet see what. Meanwhile, an unexpected twist surfaced. A Michigan scout intercepted a private letter carried by an Ohio messenger. The letter was short but revealing. "Prepare the courthouse at Maumee. We expect federal confirmation this week." This message raised a disturbing question. What federal confirmation was Ohio expecting? Michigan feared the worst. The president might declare the Harris Line to be the official boundary. If Jackson sided publicly with Ohio, Michigan's entire legal argument would collapse. But when Michigan sought clarification from Rush, the envoy who had mysteriously abandoned negotiations, they received no reply. Not a word, not a letter, nothing. Washington was going silent. And silence in politics is never accidental. The next twist came from an unexpected direction. A group of Michigan settlers from Monroe arrived at Detroit with shocking news. They had intercepted a group of men traveling under the guise of federal surveyors. But when the settlers demanded identification, the men fled into the woods, leaving behind a leather case filled with maps, tools, and a partially burned document stamped with the seal of the Ohio governor. Ohio was preparing a new line, a third line, one not based on the Northwest Ordinance or previous surveys, one drawn solely for political convenience. If Ohio established a new boundary and justified it through the courts, Michigan could lose more than Toledo. They could lose miles of territory north of the Strip. Mason knew things were unraveling quickly. Every move Michigan made was countered by Ohio's deception and Washington's silence. He gathered his advisors again. Some argued Michigan should appeal to sympathetic congressmen. Others urged Mason to travel to Washington personally. A few even recommended mobilizing every militia unit in the territory and fortifying Toledo. But then, the final twist of the chapter arrived. A small group of Michigan farmers from near the Maumee River arrived with a confession. They claimed that some of the missing militia weren't abducted. They had deserted, not because they feared Ohio, but because of what they overheard from a federal rider passing through days earlier. The rider reportedly told a tavern owner, "Washington has already made up its mind. Ohio will have Toledo. Michigan will have to accept the Upper Peninsula." These farmers insisted the militia overheard this rumor, true or not, and abandoned their posts in despair, believing the fight was already lost. This revelation shook Mason more deeply than any political threat. It wasn't Ohio that broke Michigan's morale. It was Washington. Before we transition to Chapter 6, if you're invested in this unfolding historical drama, don't forget to subscribe to Story Sphere. Share this video, like it, and turn on notifications. Supporting the channel helps us uncover more hidden chapters of history just like this. The chapter closes with a single chilling truth. Michigan was fighting Ohio on the ground, but the real enemy might be hundreds of miles away, behind closed doors in Washington. It began with a sealed envelope. No name, no address, just a wax seal bearing the faint impression of an eagle, scratched, worn, almost unrecognizable. The envelope arrived at the Detroit post office late at night, delivered by a rider who vanished before anyone could question him. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No letterhead, no signature, only a short message written in a careful, controlled hand. Seek the Butler opinion. They are hiding the truth from you. The clerk who found it didn't understand what it meant, but he knew where it needed to go. Within an hour, the envelope was in the hands of Stevens T. Mason, and when Mason read it, he felt the ground shift beneath him. The message referred to a document almost no one in Michigan had heard of. The private legal analysis written by U.S. Attorney General Benjamin Butler. A document Michigan didn't know existed. A document Washington had quietly buried. If the message was true, the federal government had evidence supporting Michigan's claim to the Toledo Strip and had deliberately kept it hidden. Mason gathered his counsel immediately. The room filled with the low hum of speculation. Some believed the message was a trap planted by Ohio sympathizers. Others believed it was genuine, leaked by a federal insider who disagreed with the administration's silence. There was only one way to find out. Mason assigned his closest advisor, Charles Kercheval, to travel to Washington and uncover the truth. Kercheval left before dawn, disguised as a land surveyor to avoid attention. His mission: find the Butler opinion. Meanwhile, tensions in the Toledo Strip were reaching their breaking point. Michigan militia units, still angered by the impersonation incident, were patrolling aggressively. Ohio forces, emboldened by Washington's silence and their recent successes, were pushing deeper into the disputed region. Both sides were preparing for a confrontation, but neither realized what was coming next. Before we continue deeper into this chapter, a reminder for everyone watching. If you're invested in this unfolding true crime history series, don't forget to subscribe to StorySphere. Like this episode, share it with others who love hidden history, and turn on notifications so you never miss a chapter. Now, back to the story. While Kercheval rode east toward Washington, the borderlands simmered. Michigan farmers, tired of constant uncertainty, began forming volunteer units to support the militia. Some armed themselves with old muskets and hunting rifles. Others sharpened tools that were never meant to be weapons. Ohio settlers were doing the same. Men from Perrysburg and Maumee trained at night, believing Michigan would attempt a strike to reclaim control. Rumors spread that Michigan was planning a coordinated attack on the Toledo courthouse. Ohio newspapers fanned the flames, printing sensational headlines. Michigan men threaten our homes. Territorial. Governor plans invasion. Ohio must stand strong. Michigan newspapers responded in kind. Ohio continues illegal incursions. Militia units kidnapped under false authority. Washington betrays the Northwest Territory. It wasn't just a border conflict anymore. It was becoming a cultural war. Two populations convinced the other was the aggressor. And in the middle of it all was Toledo, a town caught between competing governments. The Michigan militia's patrols intensified. Roads leading to Toledo were watched day and night. Ohio officials attempting to enter the Strip were confronted, questioned, and often turned away. In response, Governor Lucas sent additional forces to ensure Ohio's laws could be carried out. This buildup was pushing the Toledo War toward a true battle. But something unexpected happened. A group of Toledo residents, exhausted by the constant tension, sent an anonymous letter to both governments asking for protection. Their message was desperate. We fear we will be caught in the crossfire. Protect us, or we will take our security into our own hands. This letter spread panic in the region. If civilians armed themselves, the conflict could explode into violence neither side could control. Ohio, decided to act first. They announced a major court session to be held inside the Toledo Strip, a highly public display of Ohio authority. This was the boldest move Ohio had made so far, and it was designed to provoke a response. Michigan prepared to block it. Both sides were heading toward a confrontation larger than any that had come before. While these tensions rose, Courchevel reached Washington. He entered the capital quietly, blending in with merchants and clerks. But uncovering the Butler opinion was not easy. The document wasn't listed in any public office. It wasn't referenced in any congressional report. It was buried deep within federal correspondence, known only to a handful of officials. Courchevel spent days searching through archives, speaking to sympathetic staffers, and following rumors whispered in the Capitol's corridors. Then, by sheer luck, a junior clerk in the War Department hinted at where he might find something of interest. Courchevel followed the lead to a small, dusty records room in the Treasury Annex. There, hidden among unrelated files, he found it. A folded document marked Boundary Interpretation Confidential. Inside were Butler's conclusions. In strict accordance with the Northwest Ordinance, the southern boundary of Michigan Territory extends eastward from the true southern extremity of Lake Michigan. The lands in question fall under Michigan's rightful jurisdiction. Butler had sided with Michigan. He had concluded the Toledo Strip belonged to Michigan, and the federal government had ignored his findings. Courchevel's heart pounded as he realized the magnitude of the discovery. If this document became public, Michigan's claim would gain immense legal support. It wouldn't guarantee victory, but it would expose Washington's political maneuvering, potentially turning national opinion in Michigan's favor. But before Courchevel could celebrate his discovery, he heard footsteps in the hallway, voices, and the unmistakable sound of keys turning. Someone else knew he was there. He stuffed the document inside his coat and slipped into a storage closet just as two officials entered the room. He couldn't see their faces, but he recognized the voice of one of them, the same federal envoy who had visited the border. Richard Rush. Rush was speaking quietly. The Butler paper must not be circulated. If it reaches Congress, it will undermine the president's position. Courchevel froze. Rush wasn't a neutral peacekeeper. He was working directly to suppress Michigan's claim. The other man replied, "We've already redirected inquiries. No one outside the cabinet knows it exists." Rush answered calmly, "Good. The president will not allow Michigan to dictate terms." Their footsteps retreated. The door shut. Silence returned. Courchevel slipped out through a side exit, shaken but determined. He had what Michigan needed, and evidence that Washington was actively manipulating the conflict. Courchevel left Washington under the cover of darkness, knowing full well the federal government might pursue him if they realized the document was missing. Every mile north felt dangerous. He avoided main roads, traveled in disguise, and stayed in taverns only long enough to rest his horse. Meanwhile, back in Michigan, the militia's situation grew more desperate. Ohio forces were fortifying positions near the courthouse. They were preparing for a public confrontation that would determine the fate of the Strip. Michigan needed the Butler opinion. They needed its legitimacy. They needed it before the upcoming court session. Courchevel rode through storms, mud, and freezing nights. His horse collapsed outside Monroe, forcing him to walk the last miles on foot. By the time he reached Detroit, his coat was torn, his boots ruined, and his hands nearly frozen. But he had the document. He delivered it to Mason immediately. Mason read Butler's conclusion in silence. When he finished, his hands were trembling. This was the proof Michigan had prayed for. The proof the federal government had buried. The proof that Ohio's claim was legally flawed. But before Mason could act, before he could deliver the document to Michigan's leaders or the press, a messenger burst into the room. The Toledo courthouse session, the major one Ohio had planned, had been moved up by 2 days. Ohio was about to make its biggest move yet, and Michigan had only hours to stop it. Before we move on to Chapter 7, if you're invested in this unfolding true crime historical series, don't forget to subscribe to Story Sphere. Like the video, share it, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next chapter. The race was on. A secret document in Mason's hands, and a judicial takeover already underway. It began with a rumor, one that swept across the Toledo Strip like a spark racing through dry timber. Ohio was moving forward with the courthouse session earlier than planned. Not tomorrow, not tonight. Now. At dawn, riders from Toledo burst into the Michigan Militia camp with urgent news. Ohio officials were already gathering at the small wooden courthouse on Summit Street. Wagons carrying legal documents, election registries, and county seals had arrived in the pre-dawn light. Armed escorts lingered on the roads. Something was happening, something big, something final. Michigan's commanders reacted instantly. This wasn't just another skirmish. This was Ohio's attempt to cement their legal claim to Toledo. If the court session proceeded undisturbed, Ohio could claim the region as theirs by the will of its residents and through lawful governance. It would give Ohio the political foothold they had been working toward for months. Michigan could not allow that. Stevens T. Mason, still considered Michigan's rightful leader by the people, despite Washington's interference, was informed of the situation. He assessed the risk quickly. Michigan militia needed to move fast, faster than Ohio anticipated, and stop the court session before it began. Mason issued one of the most urgent orders of the entire conflict. Intercept them. Do not fire unless fired upon. Prevent the session at all costs. Militia units saddled horses, grabbed muskets, and formed rapid columns. The roads to Toledo flooded with Michigan forces moving at breakneck speed. Dust clouds rose behind them. Families stood on porches watching their sons ride off into a conflict that no one yet understood the full cost of. This was the moment the Toledo War teetered on the edge of becoming a real war. And, as the riders sped south, a brief reminder for those following this investigation. If you're engrossed in this unfolding story, don't forget to subscribe to StorySphere, like the video, share it, and turn on notifications. New chapters are coming, and you won't want to miss the twists ahead. The ride to Toledo was chaotic. Michigan scouts raced ahead to track Ohio movements. They returned with conflicting reports. Some said the courthouse was lightly defended. Others claimed dozens of armed Ohio men were hiding in surrounding buildings. No one knew which version was true. When Michigan militia arrived at the edge of town, the situation became clearer and worse. Ohio forces were positioned around the courthouse, not as open defenders, but as civilians. They stood in groups of 2s and 3s, pretending to be townspeople waiting for the session. Michigan officers exchanged nervous glances. If they confronted these civilians, Ohio newspapers would accuse Michigan of threatening peaceful residents. If they didn't, Ohio's officials would proceed with the court session unhindered. Michigan had walked into a trap. Still, they moved forward, cautiously. Dozens of militia dismounted, forming a perimeter around the courthouse. They ordered the crowd to disperse. Some people obeyed, stepping back nervously. Others remained, insisting they were merely citizens. Then the Ohio officials emerged from behind the courthouse, holding sealed election documents. Their leader, Judge Jonathan Baldwin, raised his voice above the noise. "This is lawful Ohio territory. We will conduct our business today." Michigan Sheriff Joseph Wood stepped forward. His voice was firm. "No session will be held here. This land remains under Michigan jurisdiction." For a moment, the two groups stared at each other in deadly silence. Then the Ohio judge signaled to his men. In an instant, the courthouse doors slammed open, and Ohio's hidden forces poured out, not as civilians, but as armed escorts. Rifles, pistols, and bayonets glinted in the morning sun. Ohio had concealed its militia among the crowd. Michigan had been outmaneuvered again. The confrontation erupted not with gunfire, but with shouts. Michigan militia rushed to block the courthouse entrance. Ohio forces moved to shield the officials. Citizens fled in all directions, screaming. The town's narrow streets turned into a maze of bodies and confusion. A Michigan officer attempted to seize the Ohio election documents, fearing the session had already begun. He grabbed the judge's satchel. Ohio escorts reacted instantly, tackling him to the ground. More militia rushed in. Fists flew, muskets were raised, and for the first time in the entire Toledo conflict, the danger of shots being fired felt imminent. But it wasn't a gunshot that triggered panic. It was the shattering of a courthouse window. Someone had thrown a stone in the chaos. The sound echoed like a musket crack. Both sides recoiled, expecting a volley to follow. Hands tightened around triggers. Several militiamen lifted rifles to their shoulders. The smallest mistake would have turned Toledo into a battlefield. The judge, shaken but determined, tried to salvage the operation. He opened his satchel, pulling out the official Ohio County seal. If he could certify even one document inside Toledo, Ohio could claim the action as lawful governance. Michigan saw it too. Sheriff Wood lunged again, this time with more force. Ohio escorts blocked him. The struggle exploded into a full street brawl, shoving, grappling, shouting, weapons being wrestled from hands, men falling into the mud. It lasted only minutes. But in those minutes, Toledo came closer to civil war than ever before. Finally, realizing the situation was spiraling out of control, the Ohio officials made a desperate run for their carriage. Michigan militia tried to stop them, but Ohio escorts formed a human shield. The carriage lurched forward as the driver whipped the horses harder than he ever had. Mud splattered across the street as the wheels tore through the town square. Ohio's operation had failed. They had not certified anything. They had not held a session. They had not produced a single valid document. Michigan had stopped them. But in stopping them, Michigan had stepped directly into the trap Ohio wanted them to fall into. Ohio newspapers erupted within hours. Michigan mob attacks Ohio officials. Judge forced to flee for his life. Savage violence in Toledo. The reality was far less dramatic. No shots had been fired. No one had been seriously injured. But the headlines were enough. Public sentiment in Ohio, already inflamed, turned white-hot. Governor Lucas used the incident to demand federal intervention. Michigan accused Ohio of staging the entire scene. Washington received conflicting reports. And in the middle of the chaos, another twist emerged, one Michigan hadn't anticipated. The Ohio carriage didn't flee south toward safety. It fled east toward Maumee. That single detail changed the meaning of everything. Why Maumee? Why not retreat to Perrysburg or Sandusky? Why risk another confrontation? The answer came later that evening, when Michigan scouts brought back news that stunned everyone. Ohio's carriage didn't just flee to Maumee, it stopped at a warehouse. And inside that warehouse, under guard, was a fully prepared courtroom. Ohio had built a secret alternate courthouse. They hadn't intended to hold just one session. They had prepared two. The failed Toledo session had been a distraction, a decoy, a carefully planned setup designed to draw Michigan militia away from the real objective. While Michigan officers were fighting in the streets of Toledo, Ohio officials slipped into the warehouse and conducted the entire session uninterrupted. They certified documents. They appointed officers. They signed county records. Legally speaking, Ohio had just won the day. Michigan didn't learn this until dusk, when the scouts delivered the intelligence report. Mason's face tightened as he read it. They had been outmaneuvered again, cleverly, quietly, and legally. But before Mason could strategize the next step, another messenger arrived, this time from Washington. He delivered a single sentence. The president will make a public statement within 48 hours. That meant one thing. Washington was about to decide Michigan's fate. Before we move into the next chapter, a quick reminder. To support this deep historical storytelling, make sure you subscribe to Story Sphere. Like this video, share it, and turn on notifications. Your support helps bring hidden history to life. It began with a leak, a single whispered sentence carried through a Washington tavern, overheard by a clerk who had no business listening. The clerk didn't understand the weight of what he'd heard, but someone else did. By dawn, the message reached the Michigan delegation in waiting. And by noon, it reached Stevens T. Mason himself. For months, Michigan had suspected the federal government was favoring Ohio. But suspicion was very different from confirmation. If President Andrew Jackson sided publicly with Ohio, the struggle over the Toledo Strip wouldn't just tilt, it would collapse entirely. Michigan militia could hold roads, seize documents, and outmaneuver Ohio officials on the ground. But no amount of physical control could compensate for a presidential decree. One signature in Washington could undo a year's worth of territorial defense. Mason paced the room slowly, absorbing the news. He had the Butler opinion, proof that Michigan's legal claim was valid. But the legal correctness of a claim meant little in the face of politics. Jackson was a president who valued loyalty, influence, and alliances. And Ohio's political machine was powerful. Michigan's delegation urged Mason to release the Butler opinion immediately, publish it, deliver it to Congress, leak it to newspapers, expose the truth. But Mason hesitated. If he released the document publicly, it might provoke Jackson. It could be seen as defiance, an open challenge to federal authority. Michigan didn't have the political weight to survive that kind of confrontation. Instead, Mason chose a riskier path. He would confront the president directly. Before we continue, a quick reminder for everyone watching. If you're enjoying this true crime-style historical deep dive, make sure to subscribe to Story Sphere. Like this chapter, share it, and turn on notifications. The next episodes uncover even more dramatic twists you won't want to miss. Now, back to the story. Mason boarded a coach headed east, carrying only the butler opinion and a few trusted advisors. He knew the meeting could determine Michigan's fate as a future state, but he didn't anticipate how hostile Washington had become. When he arrived, the political atmosphere was far worse than expected. Members of Congress brushed past him in the corridors. Many refused to speak to him. Some openly criticized Michigan's militia actions, accusing him of escalating tensions. A senator from Virginia confronted Mason directly in the Capitol hallway. "Your people have become unruly. The president cannot reward disobedience." Mason responded with calm determination. "We are defending our land, nothing more." The senator shook his head. "Land is secondary, order is primary." It was the clearest sign yet that Washington viewed Michigan as the aggressor, not Ohio. But Mason hadn't come for congressional opinions. His target was the White House. Gaining access to President Jackson wasn't easy. Jackson's schedule was tightly controlled by political allies who saw Michigan as a nuisance. But Mason was persistent, and after several days, he secured a brief appointment. Jackson received him in the study, a room filled with maps, papers, and military memorabilia. The president's expression was stern. "Mason," he said, not offering a handshake, "you've caused me a great deal of trouble." Mason remained steady. "I've defended the rights of the Michigan people." Jackson leaned back in his chair. "You've inflamed a conflict that could have been handled peacefully." Mason reached into his coat and placed the butler opinion on the desk. "This is the truth Washington has ignored." Jackson didn't move at first. When he finally picked up the document and glanced through it, his expression didn't change. He already knew of its existence, and he had chosen to ignore it. "This paper," Jackson said, "cannot change the fact that Ohio is a state and Michigan is not." Mason countered. "The law is clear. Michigan's border is defined by the Northwest Ordinance. The Strip is ours." Jackson's eyes hardened. "The law is only as strong as the will to enforce it, and I will not allow an untested territory to challenge a state." For a moment, neither man spoke. Mason realized the truth. The president had already made up his mind. Then Jackson added something that chilled Mason. "Ohio controls votes. Ohio controls influence. I cannot ignore that reality for the sake of a strip of land. You must accept a compromise." Mason felt the floor drop beneath him. "What compromise?" he asked quietly. Jackson stood, ending the meeting. "Congress will decide. But make no mistake, you will not keep Toledo." And with that, Mason was dismissed. After the meeting, Mason learned that Ohio's delegation had already struck a deal with key members of Congress. The arrangement was simple. Ohio would retain the Toledo Strip. Michigan would receive statehood, but only if it accepted the western Upper Peninsula in exchange. Most members of Congress believed the UP was worthless, cold, remote, barren. To them, it seemed like an insulting consolation prize. Michigan had spent years fighting for Toledo. To ask them to give it up now was political humiliation. But that wasn't the worst part. The deal had been arranged weeks before Mason's meeting. Jackson's meeting with him wasn't a negotiation. It was a courtesy. Ohio's representatives had prepared the compromise behind closed doors, ensuring Michigan would have no leverage when the time came. They had outmaneuvered Michigan, not through violence or militia, but through congressional alliances and political bargains. Michigan was now trapped. If they refused the deal, Congress could block their statehood indefinitely. If they accepted it, they would lose the very land they fought for. It was a political crime, disguised as diplomacy. When Mason returned to Detroit, he was greeted by crowds cheering his courage. They believed he had fought for Michigan's rights in Washington. They didn't yet know the truth. Mason gathered his advisors. He read Jackson's words from memory, delivered the news of the compromise, and placed the Butler opinion on the table. Silence filled the room. Some argued they should continue the fight. Others insisted they reveal the Butler opinion publicly and expose Washington's deception. A few demanded Michigan declare independence until Congress recognized their rights. But then, a troubling message arrived from the border. Ohio militia were fortifying Toledo. Michigan scouts reported that Ohio forces now controlled every major road leading to the courthouse. Ohio troops were constructing barricades, and they were carrying more ammunition than ever before. The border was no longer a disputed line. It was an occupied zone. Michigan leadership realized the next move wasn't just political, it was potentially violent. If Michigan resisted now, federal troops might intervene. And if federal troops intervened, Michigan could lose everything. The room buzzed with desperation. Then, in the middle of the debate, a Detroit messenger entered with a freshly printed newspaper. The headline read, Mason stared at the headline. Everything was happening faster than expected. He no longer had days or weeks to decide Michigan's future. He had hours. Before we close this chapter, a reminder for those following this unfolding true crime history. Don't forget to subscribe to Story Sphere, like this video, share it, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next chapters. Your support keeps this investigation alive. The chapter ends with Mason holding the Butler opinion, and a Congress ready to decide Michigan's fate, whether Michigan fought or surrendered. It began with a whisper, one that tore through the Michigan militia camps with a force stronger than gunfire. Ohio is marching into Toledo tonight. Not just officials, not disguised militiamen, not small teams hiding behind legal pretexts. This time, Ohio was sending nearly 600 armed men moving under the authority of Governor Lucas. Their orders were simple: secure Toledo, hold it, and prevent Michigan forces from interfering with the next court session scheduled at sunrise. Michigan officers had mere hours to react. Stevens T. Mason, still reeling from his meeting with President Jackson, understood the stakes instantly. If Ohio occupied Toledo in force, Michigan's claim would collapse overnight. No legal argument, no Butler opinion, no public sentiment could undo the visual reality of armed Ohio control. Michigan had one option left: act before Ohio arrived. The militia saddled up. Riders shouted orders. Horses screamed in protest as they were whipped into motion. Lanterns flickered across the camp as men loaded muskets and clipped powder horns to their belts. They were preparing for the first real battle of the Toledo War. Before we continue, if you're invested in this escalating true crime historical story, don't forget to subscribe to Story Sphere. Like this episode, share it, and turn on notifications. The next chapters contain some of the most shocking moments yet. Now, back to the story. Michigan militia rode through the night, following a narrow road through the black swamp. Mud splashed up to the horses' stomachs. Mosquitoes swarmed. The air was thick and heavy. Scouts rode ahead, returning with alarming news every few minutes. Ohio men spotted crossing the river, more troops advancing from Perrysburg, wagons carrying ammunition. They're building barricades outside town. Michigan wasn't just late. They were badly outnumbered, but they pressed forward anyway. Their goal wasn't to defeat Ohio in open battle. They knew that was impossible. Their goal was to reach Toledo first, secure key buildings, and force Ohio to negotiate from a position of weakness. Time became their enemy. Every sound in the swamp felt like an approaching regiment. Then came the first twist. A Michigan scout returned with an intelligence report that made no sense. "Ohio troops aren't heading to the courthouse," he said breathlessly. "They're heading into the woods." The commanders froze. Into the woods? Why? What could Ohio possibly want in the forest at night? The answer came minutes later when another scout, pale and shaking, delivered a detail that changed everything. Ohio is building a hidden encampment. They're preparing an ambush. Ohio knew Michigan would try to reclaim Toledo. They knew Michigan would rush through the swamp roads at night, and they had positioned their men in the thick forest to cut the militia off before reaching the town. This wasn't a march. This wasn't a show of force. It was a planned military trap. Michigan was riding straight into it. It happened suddenly. As Michigan's vanguard approached a clearing, rifles cracked from both sides. Ohio men poured out of the trees shouting orders. Michigan horses reared back. Militiamen dove for cover behind logs and boulders. For a moment, chaos swallowed everything. But then Michigan officers noticed something strange. Ohio soldiers weren't aiming to kill. Every musket shot struck the ground or tree trunks nearby. Not a single Michigan militiaman was hit. The volleys were designed to terrify, not to kill. It was intimidation, a psychological attack, a warning. Michigan responded by firing a volley into the air, intentionally missing as well. Both sides were playing the same game. Neither wanted to be the one to shed blood first. If one life was lost, just one, federal troops would descend like a hammer, punishing whichever side pulled the trigger. Michigan retreated into the swamp, navigating through thick mud and tangled roots. The Ohio ambush had forced them off the road, slowing them enough for Ohio's main force to tighten their grip on Toledo. But then came another unexpected twist. Just as Michigan fell back, an Ohio officer rode forward under a white cloth. "Hold your fire," he shouted. "I bring terms." Michigan officers hesitated, but allowed the rider to approach. The Ohio officer handed them a sealed envelope stamped with Governor Lucas's crest. The message was clear. Ohio would allow Michigan militia safe passage into Toledo, but only if they agreed not to interfere with the court session at dawn. It was a trap within a trap. A deceptive offer masking a dominant strategic position. Michigan commanders argued fiercely. Some wanted to reject the offer and force their way into town. Others argued they had no choice. Ohio now had hundreds of men stationed inside Toledo, and attacking them would be suicide. The argument raged until one young lieutenant spoke. "Let a small unit in. Not the militia, the sheriff. If it's a trap, he can retreat. If it's not, "We can negotiate." It was a risky compromise, but it was their only chance. Sheriff Joseph Wood, accompanied by a handful of unarmed men, rode cautiously into Toledo under the uneasy truce. Ohio soldiers watched them with cold eyes. The sheriff passed through the main street, noting the numbers. At least 400 men, possibly more hidden. Ohio had turned Toledo into a fortress. Wood reached the courthouse, expecting to find Ohio officials preparing for the session, but he found something far stranger. The courthouse was empty. No clerks, no judges, no documents. It was as if the entire operation had already happened, or it was happening somewhere else. Then he noticed wagon tracks, barely visible in the mud, leading away from the courthouse and toward the river. Ohio wasn't holding the court session in Toledo. They were holding it on a boat. Wood followed the tracks to the riverbank. There, he found a small passenger vessel decorated with Ohio flags. Inside, through the foggy windows, he saw men seated around a table, signing documents under lamplight. Ohio had moved their courthouse onto a boat to avoid Michigan interference entirely. Wood tried to board, but was blocked by Ohio guards. The session continued uninterrupted. Documents were signed. Records were stamped. Ohio lawfully conducted the day's business, technically inside the Toledo Strip, but beyond Michigan's reach. Michigan had been outmaneuvered again. While this was unfolding, something else was happening in Washington, another twist that neither state expected. A confidential order, drafted by federal officials late at night, was preparing to authorize a third party to intervene: federal marshals. But the shocking part wasn't that marshals were being deployed. It was where they were being sent. Not to Ohio. Not to the swarm of armed men occupying Toledo. They were being sent to Michigan. The federal government was preparing to arrest Michigan officials, possibly even Mason himself, for obstruction of lawful governance. In one move, Washington was preparing to break Michigan's resistance permanently. The order had not yet been signed, but the intention was clear. Meanwhile, back at the river, Sheriff Wood watched helplessly as the Ohio boat drifted downstream, carrying the signed documents that would cement Ohio's claim. He returned to Michigan lines with the news. Michigan officers were devastated. Mason read Wood's report in painful silence. Ohio had outmaneuvered them yet again, with a plan so unorthodox, so unexpected, that Michigan couldn't have stopped it even if they had known. Then a second message arrived. A messenger, breathless and terrified, delivered it directly to Mason. "It's from Washington," he said, "marked urgent." Mason broke the seal. His face blanched. The message was short. "Cease all militia activity immediately. Federal enforcement will begin." The federal hammer was about to fall. Before we move to Chapter 10, if you've been following this incredible true crime historical conflict, don't forget to subscribe to Story Sphere. Like this episode, share it, and turn on notifications. The final chapters contain the most shocking revelations of all. With Michigan facing the unthinkable, Ohio had outmaneuvered them on the ground, and now Washington was preparing to crush them from above. It began with a knock on the door. Stevens T. Mason was still reading the president's urgent message when the pounding echoed through the hallway of the territorial capital. Guards rushed to open it, expecting a messenger. It wasn't. 3 federal marshals stepped inside, wearing dark coats, badges glinting beneath their collars. Their leader held a folded document in his hand, one Mason recognized instantly, a federal arrest order. But the marshal didn't speak. He simply stared at Mason as if waiting for him to break the silence. Mason stood motionless. For months, he had watched Ohio manipulate the courts, hide behind political allies, and stage operations with precision. For months, he had fought tooth and nail to keep Michigan's honor intact. But now, with this one order, Washington had made its intentions unmistakably clear. Michigan's resistance had gone too far. Washington was ready to punish them. And with the Ohio-controlled court session now complete, carried out on a boat under cover of fog, the federal government no longer needed to pretend neutrality. Michigan had been isolated, cornered, politically suffocated. "Governor Mason," the marshal said, "you are ordered to cease all enforcement actions in the Toledo Strip immediately. Failure to comply will result in federal intervention." The marshals did not handcuff him. They did not remove him from office. They didn't need to. The message was enough. Mason nodded, dismissing them with quiet dignity. The marshals left as swiftly as they arrived. As the door closed, Michigan's commanders looked at Mason with unease. Federal orders were not suggestions. Refusing them was rebellion, and no territory could survive a rebellion. Mason knew that. He also knew what came next. Before we continue, a quick message for those watching. If you love deep-dive historical storytelling and want to support more dramatic series like this, don't forget to subscribe to Story Sphere, like the video, share it, and turn on notifications. Your support helps bring complex stories like this to life. Now, back to the conclusion. Mason called an immediate council meeting. Militia officers, judges, territorial delegates, and community leaders crowded into the room. The tension was suffocating. He read the president's message aloud. "Cease all militia activity. Federal enforcement will begin. Congress will determine Michigan's admission." Gasps filled the room. Some cursed. Others fell silent in despair. A few demanded that Michigan continue resisting. One man slammed his fist on the table. "Let the Federals come. We'll defend our land." Another shouted, "They want us divided. We must show strength." But Mason raised his hand and the room fell silent. "We are not fighting Ohio anymore," he said. "We are fighting Washington." The truth hung in the air like smoke. Michigan could not defeat the United States government. Not militarily, not politically, not economically. The Toledo War was no longer a border dispute. It had become a test of obedience, and Washington wanted Michigan to yield. Then came the next blow. Congress scheduled an emergency vote on Michigan's status. Mason understood the political reality. Michigan statehood was the ultimate prize. Representation, sovereignty, economic power. Losing Toledo was painful, but being denied statehood entirely would cripple the territory for decades. Michigan had to choose: Toledo or statehood, pride or power, honor or survival. It was the most difficult choice they would ever face. When Congress convened, the debate was explosive. Ohio's representatives presented the newly certified court records as proof of their governance in Toledo. They accused Michigan of lawlessness, violence, and territorial arrogance. Their speeches were fiery, rehearsed, and politically devastating. Michigan's delegation countered by presenting the Butler opinion, the secret legal document Washington had buried. Members gasped as they read it. For the first time, many realized Michigan had been legally right all along. But law was not the deciding factor. Politics was. Ohio had allies. Michigan had none. Southern states sided with Ohio because they feared setting a precedent the territories could challenge established states. Northeastern states sided with Ohio because they needed Ohio's support in other legislation. Even states sympathetic to Michigan hesitated. They saw Michigan as bold to the point of recklessness. One congressman from Kentucky summed up the sentiment bluntly. The boy governor must be taught a lesson. And yet, something unexpected happened. A handful of congressmen quietly approached Michigan's representatives and whispered the same advice. Accept the compromise. Take statehood. Take the Upper Peninsula. At first, Michigan delegates laughed. The Upper Peninsula was seen as worthless, frozen forest, rocky wilderness, inhabited only by a scattering of fur traders and native tribes. Why would Michigan trade rich farmland and a strategic port for a frozen wasteland? But the whispers grew louder. Accept the deal or remain a territory forever. Jackson will not change his mind. You will not get a better offer. And then came the final blow. A congressional clerk rushed into the chamber with breaking news. Ohio was preparing new legislation to permanently deny Michigan any claim to Toledo. If Michigan refused the deal, they would not only lose Toledo, they would lose statehood for years, possibly decades. Mason and the Michigan delegates left the chamber feeling defeated, outplayed, and betrayed. They returned to Detroit carrying the burden of an impossible decision. Word of the compromise spread through Michigan like wildfire. In taverns, farmers pounded tables in rage. Young men vowed to ride into Toledo themselves. Women gathered signatures demanding resistance. Crowds gathered in Detroit chanting, "No surrender, no compromise." Public pressure mounted so fiercely that the territorial legislature voted unanimously to reject Congress's offer. Michigan would not give up Toledo. Not for statehood, not for Washington, not for anyone. But the celebration didn't last. Within weeks, the consequences hit hard. Congress froze Michigan's federal funding. Federal land offices were shut down. Economic activity came to a halt. Settlers began moving away. Michigan was starving politically and financially. Then winter arrived, one of the harshest in years. Food prices soared. Roads became impassable. And with no statehood, Michigan could not collect taxes or sell land to raise money. Pride was becoming too expensive. Mason hated what he was about to do. But leadership demands sacrifice. He called a second convention. Delegates gathered in Ann Arbor in December, bracing against the bitter cold. Their breath hung in the air as they debated inside a frigid, dimly lit hall. Many of them had opposed the compromise passionately, but now, with families suffering and the territory in crisis, their opinions began to shift. For 10 days, arguments raged. Without statehood, we die. Without Toledo, we lose our dignity. The UP is worthless. The UP might have value we haven't discovered yet. Jackson forced us into this. Ohio treated us like enemies. Finally, on December 14, 1836, the lowest political moment in Michigan's history, the delegates voted. They accepted the compromise. Michigan surrendered Toledo. In exchange, they received statehood, the western Upper Peninsula. Half the territory we know today as Michigan came from that single vote. When news reached Washington, Congress approved Michigan's admission almost immediately. President Jackson signed the bill. Michigan became the 26th state. Ohio rejoiced, Washington relaxed, Michigan mourned. The Toledo War was over. Months passed, a year, 2 years. Anger remained, but life moved on. Michigan focused on building its new state institutions. Ohio strengthened its economy around Toledo. Washington pretended the conflict had been resolved peacefully. No one thought much about the Upper Peninsula. Then something unexpected happened. Miners found copper, then iron, then massive ore deposits that would power industrial America for a century. Newspapers wrote, almost limitless wealth discovered in the UP, richest mineral deposits in the Midwest. A land we once believed worthless now reveals unimaginable value. Michigan had surrendered Toledo, a marshy port town. In return, they gained one of the richest mineral regions on the continent, millions of dollars in copper, millions more in iron, a resource base that would support Michigan's economy for generations. It was the final twist in a story full of twists. Michigan lost the war. Michigan lost Toledo. Michigan was humiliated, but Michigan won the future. Historians would later say the Toledo War was bloodless. They were wrong. It bled pride. It bled politics. It bled identity. It revealed the truth about American expansion. Law mattered, but votes mattered more. Justice mattered, but influence mattered more. A young territory could be right and still lose. And yet, from the ashes of political betrayal came Michigan's unexpected triumph. Today, the Upper Peninsula, won through humiliation, is celebrated as the jewel of Michigan's natural beauty and history. Toledo, meanwhile, remains part of Ohio, a constant reminder of a line drawn on a bad map, a political battle that nearly sparked a war, and a bargain that reshaped America's geography. Before we close this series, if you want more hidden history stories told with cinematic depth, suspense, and true crime intensity, don't forget to subscribe to Story Sphere. Share this series, like the video, and turn on notifications. Huge stories like this deserve to be heard. Stevens T. Mason died just 3 years later at age 31, young, exhausted, and never fully recognized for the sacrifices he made. Today, he is remembered as the boy governor, the man who stood against Washington and fought for Michigan's identity. Governor Lucas of Ohio retired comfortably, having secured Toledo and cemented his political legacy. And Andrew Jackson. He left behind a presidency marked by power, loyalty, and decisions that favored political allies over justice. The Toledo War ended without a single battlefield death. But in many ways, it was one of the most revealing conflicts in American history. A war fought not with bullets, but with borders, not with armies, but with politics, not with bloodshed, but with the kind of backroom deals that shape nations. And that is the true story of how Michigan lost Toledo and gained a kingdom instead.